All right, good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the workshop of the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. And this is the first meeting of this new commission. And so we'll spend some time in just a moment with everyone giving an introduction of themselves. But it's great to be with you and the new commission this morning. The purpose of the State Textbook Commission is to develop and recommend a list of approved textbooks which align with Tennessee state standards to the State Board of Education, and the State Board of Education to push out to districts as an approved list. And districts from the list can choose books that meet their needs. And so that is our purpose as a commission. As such, it's a incredibly important work as we select the highest quality materials for the teachers and for the students. And the materials that we select will, in part, ultimately determine the quality of education. So our work is very important. The purpose of the workshop that we have that we'll start every meeting with is something that's relatively new to the commission, but we found in the past that the commission had a lot of questions, and instead of having all these questions come up at the meeting where there's action items and changes in policy and such to adopt, we began having this workshop time where we can hear about the proposals that will be coming up in the meeting. We can ask questions and get a lot of clarification and understanding out of the way in preparation for the meeting so that the meeting can be more streamlined. And so that's what the meeting will have. Begins at 1:30, and this morning our purpose is the workshop to hear what will be, parts of what will be on the agenda for our 1:30 meeting today. We conduct our meetings, the workshop, and the regular meeting according to Robert's Rules of Order, just to have consistency on this commission like many other commissions across the state. I know many of you are familiar with Rules of Order in your local school boards and such. And so just to keep things orderly and moving along and to honor everyone's time, we do follow the rules. And so I, as acting chairman, will recognize individuals to speak. And so if you will, please, when it comes time to ask questions and so forth, I'll ask for questions. If you'll just motion to me, and I'll recognize you to speak. I think at this time it would be good to have introductions. And we will start to my far left. And as I said on the conference call back when we were trained, I would love it if you would introduce yourself, just give a brief introduction. And I think everyone, when you pick up your mic, make sure you press the red button so that you can be heard. If we can start with Ms. Nash.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Nash, and I am from Paris, Tennessee, and this is my 7th year to teach first grade at Harrelson Elementary School.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nash. Ms. Cruz.
Hi, I'm Kelsey Cruz. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, where I teach special education in the high school level. I teach at Fulton High School there.
Thank you, Ms. Cruz. Ms. Bryant.
I'm Cindy Bryant. I am not an educational professional. I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I'm just glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant. Dr. Robinson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jason Robinson, and I taught 17 years in the public school system in Bradley County and made the jump to the university level. I'm now a professor at Lee University in the Helen DeVos College of Education.
Ms. Taylor.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Taylor. I am a staff attorney at the Tennessee Department of Education in the Office of General Counsel, and I serve as an advisor to the Textbook Commission.
I'll introduce myself at this time. I'm Dr. Craig Hammond, and I'm a principal here in Nashville at West End Middle School. And I have been in education now 12 years, and this is my 4th year on the commission. And I'm the acting chairman. Thank you. Ms. Wright.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Wright. I'm with the State Department of Education. I am the Policy and Communications Coordinator in the Division of Curriculum and Instruction, and I provide policy analysis and administrative support to the Commission.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. Dr. Kirk.
Hi, I'm Vicki Kirk. I'm in my 25th year as an educator. I've recently joined the department as a Deputy Commissioner, Chief Academic Officer, and I serve as the Commissioner's representative on the Commission.
Thank you, Dr. Kirk. Mr. Mallory.
My name is Kyle Mallory. I'm a teacher at Stewart County Middle School and community activist Republican. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mallory. Ms. Bunch.
Good morning. My name is Susan Bunch. I'm a director of schools in Lexington City. I've been a teacher, a supervisor of instruction, assistant commissioner of education, worked for a not-for-profit education agency in Mississippi, and I'm back as a director of schools once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bunch. Dr. Campbell.
Bill Campbell, I'm a citizen member of the commission. I thank you for appointed. I've been background in education, Shelby County, public schools, several years in the college commission, several years as a headmaster here at school. Delighted to be part of this commission.
Thank you, Dr. Campbell. Item 2 on our agenda for the workshop is revised 2014 through 16 Section A adoption schedule. Chair recognizes Monty Wilson, Deputy Director, Content and Resources, Tennessee Department of Education.
Good morning. Testing. Okay. Good morning, Commission. My name is Monty Wilson, Deputy Director of Content and Resources with the Tennessee Department of Education. As Dr. Hammond just stated, the first item on the workshop agenda is the revised 2014-16 Section A adoption schedule. In your binders, if you look under tab 1, there are two different schedules, one on page 1 and then 1 and 2, front and back, and then one on page 3. The document that is page 1 and 2 was is the current adoption schedule that was previously adopted last year. Upon close review of this adoption schedule, we realized that there were some conflicts with some dates, particularly with summer training with our advisory panelists, and we had actually a meeting scheduled for Mother's Day weekend, and that had caused problems in the past. So what we have done is we have tried to revise that to free up Mother's Day weekend for everyone. And so beginning on page 3, you will notice a draft copy of that Section A adoption schedule, which we will be proposing to be adopted at the actual or during the meeting this afternoon. But I wanted to bring this to your attention and explain why there was a change, why we're bringing this to you again this afternoon, and I would be happy to answer any questions you have regarding either the change or the schedule in general at this point in time.
Commission members have any questions for Mr. Wilson? Mr. Mallory.
I assume what's in bold is the that's changes and the others are the same?
Actually, if you look on, that would be a great assumption if it was true. Unfortunately, it's not. Thank you for pointing that out. If you look on page 4, actually, this document that is online is color-coded. Bold are actually just listed as important date for publishers because they have certain deadlines. Red would be meeting dates, blue are state board dates. The biggest change, actually, if you'd like for me to point that out, is the weekend originally was scheduled for May 9th and 10th was what's called the Textbook Review Committee orientation and publisher presentations, and May 9th and 10th is the Mother's Day weekend. So we basically moved that up a week. Thank you for pointing that out. I should have stated that earlier.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Item 3 on the workshop agenda is bids received for Cycle A textbooks and instructional materials. Monty Wilson will again speak to this.
Yes, this next section deals with bids for Section A. And if you would look actually in the back pocket, you will find a document or several documents. I'm actually going to pull mine out as well. They're behind that first set of stapled documents, I believe, in everybody's binder. But if you look behind there, you will find two documents. One is listed as the preliminary textbook bid list summary, which is a one-page document. And then you have a fairly thick stapled packet, which is the actual bids that the Department of Education received for Section A. And I will just briefly summarize a little bit for you, and then what I will do is take any questions that you have at this point in time. But our current adoption cycle for this coming year is Section A, and that includes the following CTE Career Technical Education courses. It's Advanced Manufacturing, Information Technology, Human Services, and Education and Training. Bids were due to our offices at 10 a.m. on March 3rd. The invitation to bid for publishers was opened in December of 2014. So as of March 3rd of this year, 2015, we originally had 7 different publishers bid on their materials for the textbook process. However, and those publishers are Cengage Learning, CEV Media, CompuScholar, EMC, Goodhart Wilcox, McGraw-Hill, and Prentice Hall, which is a division of Pearson. However, since we printed this information for you, I did want to make sure that you understood that at this time, Prentice Hall has withdrawn their bid. So they have chosen not to participate, which they are allowed to do. So at this time, we are down to 6 publishers who will be bidding materials for the CTE clusters this year. The one page is sort of an overview of how many bids we received for certain courses. I believe it's 24 different CTE courses, if my math is right, that we will be reviewing textbooks for and that you will be, of course, looking at this year. And those will be coming from those 6 publishers. The packet is the actual bid information that we received in regards to the materials, whether it's teacher edition, student edition, down to any supplemental materials, and includes cost. So this is the official document in as condensed a form as we could provide it for you. At this time, I will do my best to answer any questions you might have about the preliminary bids for Section A.
Okay, questions for Mr. Wilson? Okay, Dr. Kirk?
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So for the majority of these, we have only one bidder for the course. That seems problematic to me. Is there any way we could improve the number of bidders we have?
At this time, it is my understanding we cannot because a deadline is passed for the submission of those bids. I did a little bit of research. For those of you that don't know, I've been in this role now just about, I think this is my 15th month. So this was my first adoption with CTE. CTE adoptions apparently are often much lighter than the core academic areas because it's reaching a smaller portion of students, mostly at just the high school level and those enrolled in CTE courses. Based on the research I did looking at some past adoptions, this looked fairly similar to what we'd received before. The process, what I can tell you in terms of from a quote maybe advertising perspective is we have a listserv at the department of all the publishers that we know of that have requested they be on our mailing list. And so starting in actually November, we do an invitation to bid where we say we would like to know if you're considering bidding on the upcoming adoption. And then we have the actual invitation to bid. And all of that information is shared electronically via email with all the publishers that we know. And then we also include that information online on a specific page for publishers under the Textbook Services web pages, to where all that information is as well. So we, to my knowledge, at this point in time, those two avenues are how we try to encourage or advertise that we have an upcoming adoption. But at this point in time, the bid process closes as of that date at 10 a.m., to where we cannot receive any more bids moving forward.
Excuse me, is it safe to say that there are fewer publishers in this area of education than the other academic field?
Not being from the publishing world, it would be hard for me to say that's true. Based on the experience I've had since being in this job, I do know that there are less publishers who work in this area as compared to math, which was last year. I believe last year with math we started with 17 different publishers, and many of those publishers for math were smaller publishers, and that's all they did was math. So with CTE, yes, Dr. Campbell, I do believe that there's probably less market for these materials.
And Monty, you said originally there were how many bids, and then someone withdrew?
We did. We originally had 7 publishers that wished to participate, and we received notification that Prentice Hall chose to withdraw all of their bids, so they will not be participating in this process this year.
Okay, and some of the publishers, so 6 publishers for CTE, not all of them has a textbook to submit for the various courses.
Correct. Yes. Some, they will vary per cluster or per course because CTE is so diversified in terms of how many courses fall into the certain clusters.
Okay, Mr. Kirk. Mr. Mallory, sorry.
Sorry. So why did Prentice Hall leave?
Why did they leave? I do not have that knowledge. That would have to be a question they would answer. We received an official letter and notification that they wish to withdraw. When they submit their bids, a bid deposit is required, and when they submitted their withdrawal letter, they requested to withdraw from the process, and then they requested their bid deposit back, which we are required to give them. But there was no indication in their letter. They just said they were choosing not to participate.
Any other questions for Mr. Wilson? Ms. Bunch?
So under child care, electromechanical, where it says Pearson Education Publishing is Prentice Hall, is that still included, or is that?
No, everything starting on page, if I'm correct, starting on page 23 of this packet, all of that information has been withdrawn. Okay. Page 23 through 27.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that clarifying point.
Ms. Brown has a question.
Okay. Previously, when you opened this up, how many of them had bid for it the last time it was open?
That I could not tell you. That would have been 6 years ago, and me being only in the role.
Was it that short a period of time? Because you said it was open from November, December, and then the bids in January.
I'm sorry. The process, the timeline for submitting, that process timeline has not changed. We follow the same timeline. Yes, okay. Ma'am. We have a fairly strict calendar that we follow. That's one of the things I learned very quickly being new to the job. But the actual timeline is normally that in November you do what's called an intent to bid, where it's non-binding, but we'd like to get a ballpark idea of maybe what we're receiving. And then we have the invitation to bid period. And in terms of how much time publishers have to make those determinations, that would have been consistent.
And consistent.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So just as a point of reference that I didn't mention at the beginning, the reason why we have to use the microphones is for live streaming, which is online, just to make sure our public audience can hear and hear the dialogue. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda of the workshop is 2015 State Advisory Panelists, and Mr. Wilson, Tennessee Department of Education, will speak to this again.
Yes. We began recruiting for state advisory panelists. We do that in conjunction with about the same times that we advertise for the invitation to bid. So we recruited to have applicants who would serve on the advisory panel to review the textbooks and instructional materials that are going to be bid this cycle. That began in December of 2014. Educators and subject matter experts had the opportunity to apply to serve on the advisory panel for Section A. Just as a quick summary of that application, I worked in conjunction with the Division of CTE to have a very thorough application. It had 3 components. Applicants were required to submit a letter of intent, and it required examples of student growth, the interest level of the applicant, and their process for choosing resources within their class. Then they also had to complete an applicant practice exercise where they created an original task aligned to CTE standards to where they were trying to create materials to teach in their classroom. And then the final piece of their application was they were to include 2 letters of recommendation. So we received applications in the months of December, January, and early February. There were 29 applicants statewide. And on February 11th of 2015, we had a review committee, which included individuals from the Career and Technical Education Division, the Curriculum and Instructional Division, the State Board of Education, and actually the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. We reviewed those applications that morning, and there were 16 individuals who actually were selected to review textbooks based on the need that we had. There were some applicants who may have wanted to review a textbook that we did not have any bids for, or we had minimal bids and several different applicants. So we used a rubric to grade each applicant. We ranked those, and we chose 16 individuals to serve on the advisory panel. Excuse me. If you look under tab 1 of your folders, and on page 5, I believe it is, there's a list of those individuals who were selected to serve on the textbook advisory panel. Since the publication of this document, or the printing of this document, we have had to make one change. If you would like to make the notation on page 5 for your documents, if you look down, Crystal Urin, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, 3rd from the bottom, Crystal had to withdraw serving for certain reasons, and she notified us. So what we did was we went to look to see who the next qualified applicant was. We reached out to that individual, and Diana Hall agreed to serve in that slot. And she is a CTE teacher from Wilson County, so she will be replacing Crystal Urin with the advisory panel for Section A. At this point in time, if you have any questions regarding the advisory panel, either the selection process or their responsibilities, I would be happy to do my best to answer those questions for you.
Any questions for Mr. Wilson? Okay, item 5 is Cycle A textbooks and instructional materials screening instruments. Mr. Thomas Gibney, Program Manager for Student Success, Division of Career and Technical Education, Tennessee Department of Education. Mr. Gibney.
Commission members, good morning, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Thomas Gibney, and I'm here representing the Division of CTE, now called the Division of College and Career Readiness. And this morning, I'm going to briefly discuss what components are involved in the instruments, how they were developed, and I'll take any questions you have about what's involved in those instruments. Briefly, I want to begin by discussing the instruments that we developed. All Cycle A screening instruments must be approved by the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission per Commission Rule 0520-5-1-.09. We developed 12 screening instruments, and they were modeled after the mathematics screening instruments that were developed for last year's adoption cycle. We wanted to stay true to the original intent and the format of those materials, and so with slight variations to capture the curricular nuances of CTE subjects, we basically followed the same formula for mathematics, and that's because we want all of our subject areas to be evaluated at the same level of rigor and intent as the mathematics ones. So there are 12 screening instruments developed. We have aligned them primarily to programs of study, which is how our CTE courses are arranged. And under the 4 career clusters, advanced manufacturing, education and training, human services, and information technology that fall under Cycle A, we did have a total of 12 programs of study, and so that's why we developed the 12 screening instruments. At this time, if you would like to turn to under tab 5, turn to page 133 in your binder. I'm going to do a brief walkthrough of one of the screening instruments. And like I said, they are quite similar. The only difference is to capture the different content nuances from program of study to program of study. So I hope that walking through one of them and pointing out the components will help us get an idea, and you can ask me any questions based off of that. Okay. So the model I'm going to walk through right now is aligned to the programming and software development program of study, and that's in the information technology career cluster. There are 3 sections to the screening instrument, and that is the same for all 12 of them. The first section are the non-negotiable components, and there are 3 components there. The first is focus. This speaks to whether students and teachers using the materials as designed devote the majority of time in each level to the course standards, and you can see the different indicators that fall under focus there. The second element in the non-negotiable portion is rigor. This captures whether each level's instructional materials reflect high expectations for all students. They follow faithfully the level of rigor intended in the standards and support student learning through high-quality presentation of content and challenging application. And finally, and this was an addition from the mathematics model of last year, is post-secondary and career readiness. This is a big focus for us in CTE, and so we felt that the textbook screening instruments should be able to capture that. Materials promote multiple pathways to student success beyond high school, highlighting a range of career opportunities aligned with entry and exit points to and from appropriate post-secondary programs. Aligned pathways are presented in a fair and balanced fashion that underscores the need for advanced training beyond high school, but does not privilege one set of credentials over another, and is consistent with occupational requirements. Basically, in layman's terms, that's saying, we want to honor the full range of post-secondary opportunities that are aligned to our programs of study, whether that's a 4-year, a 2-year, or a certificate from one of our many Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology. So the way that the first section is scored, being non-negotiable, all items must be marked yes in order to advance on to the next part of the evaluation. If any of the indicators are marked no by the panelists, then we have to, at that time, discard that or present that back to the publishers for an opportunity to revise, and Monty can speak to that if you have any questions about that process. Moving on to Section 2, I'm on page 139 now. Section 2 are negotiable components, which means that they are not required in order to be passed for adoption in Tennessee. Really, the best way to think about this section is as a decision-making tool for LEAs. So this helps reviewers capture qualitative observations about the particular instrument or a textbook that they're reviewing. And then LEAs in turn can take that information and help make decisions based on what their specific needs are in their school system. So there are 5 components to this one. The first one is additional alignment criteria. Again, this is expanded from what mathematics was last year, and that's to capture all of the diverse industry alignments, certification opportunities that come with CTE courses. And you can see the different indicators there. The second one is sequence and progression of standards. Basically, whether the materials presented in the textbooks represent the sequential progression of knowledge and skills in our own standards. Section 3 is devoted to teacher supports, making sure that there are enough supports built into the materials to assist teachers as they're using those textbooks. The fourth is usability. And finally, the fifth one is assessments. And as opposed to the non-negotiable section, this one is scored on a 3-point scale, 0, 1, and 2. 0 indicates that it does not meet that criteria, 1 that it partially meets, and 2 that it fully meets that criteria. And again, this is not a punitive scoring system. This won't count against the publishers in terms of whether it's allowed to be adopted, but it helps LEAs make a decision about what materials are best for them. And finally, we have an optional third section that we have added to the screening instruments this year. And once again, to capture the diversity of CTE subjects, this is just a qualitative section where reviewers can note a particular focus area. For example, in this particular screening instrument, programming and software development, we want to give reviewers a chance to note that there is perhaps a focus in Python or another programming language that would be important to a particular school system. And again, that section is optional, so not a requirement to fill it out, but it is kind of an open-ended response there. One more thing I would like to note to the Commission. Though we developed 12 screening instruments, we only received bids for courses aligned to 9 of them. So I'm still going to be advancing for your consideration all 12 of them today, but please know that we only have bids up for 9 of those instruments. At this time, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that explanation of the instrument and the walkthrough of one. Are there any questions for Mr. Gibney? Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Item 6 is the Publisher Corrective Action Plans. Ms. Rebecca Wright, Policy and Communications Coordinator, Division of Curriculum and Instruction, Tennessee Department of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. My name is Rebecca Wright with the Tennessee Department of Education. I will direct you to tab number 1 in your binders, page number 7. It should say Publisher Corrective Action Plans Guide at the top. As many of you know from the training, in 2014, the Tennessee General Assembly passed a law that changed multiple provisions within the state textbook statute. That law included a new requirement that publishers who submit textbooks or instructional materials for the Commission's review and recommendation to the board must execute an agreement to correct all factual and editing errors found in those textbooks once they are on the state-approved list. So what this document does is it outlines the policy and process for which publishers will follow when they submit those corrective action plans. So to begin with the timeline, any plans that are submitted are based on books that are on the state-approved list. So once the State Board of Education approves the list of textbooks, members of the public, school teachers, principals, any citizen of the state of Tennessee can submit what we call a public comment form. It's posted on the State Department of Education's Textbook Services website, which is on the screen. And once they complete that form is submitted to the Department of Education. We receive that form, and on it they note any either factual or editing errors that they have found in the textbooks or instructional materials that they have reviewed. Once those errors are identified, then we submit those notifications directly to the publishers. The publishers have 30 days after they receive those notices to then submit to the Department of Education their corrective action plans for how they propose to address those errors identified. We then submit those to the State Board of Education, and the State Board of Education will take action on those plans. On page 9 of your packet, this is outlined in kind of like a bubble format that goes through each stage of this process. So we propose to bring these plans to the State Board of Education once a year, probably during their October meeting or their spring meeting, depending on how many plans we receive. And then after the State Board of Education, they can determine whether to approve those plans or to not approve them and submit feedback to the publishers on how they would like them to revise those plans. So they could either take one of those two courses of action. Once the State Board of Education determines their action, if they do not approve the plan, the publishers can then receive that feedback and choose to resubmit them. And the board would really have authority at that point to determine whether to approve them or not. The Department of Education will notify both the publishers, the members of the public, the Tennessee General Assembly, and the members of the commission about the action made on those plans, and then post those finalized approved plans on the Textbook Services website. So all of that information is outlined in the guide as well as the bubble document. The policies and rules and state laws that are impacted by this are listed on, or that guide this process, are listed on page 8 of your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you all have at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Wright, you said that this is a completely new process per the new state law. Is that correct?
Yes, the law was passed by the Tennessee General Assembly in spring 2014, and it went into effect on January 1st of 2015.
Thank you. Mr. Mallory.
Question, does this include the ones we're approving now? Are all textbooks approved and not approved even 5 or 6 years ago?
It's a great question. It will affect any book that is on the state approved list, which could include any books that are on the 6-year contract. So, for example, the math textbooks that were approved by the commission last year. This does not impact the books that you're currently reviewing because they're not on the state approved list. Members of the public who have comments about those particular books can submit the public comment review form, which is a separate form and is also listed on the Department of Education's website.
Any other questions for Mrs. Wright? Okay, item 7 is the March 23rd Commission meeting agenda items. Ms. Rebecca Wright, Tennessee Department of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rebecca Wright, Tennessee Department of Education. Members, in your left front pocket, you will have a copy of the meeting agenda for this afternoon that begins at 1:30 p.m. So I'm going to briefly go through these items one by one, and if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them as we go through each. So we can stop, and then if there are questions I'm unable to answer, we may call on the presenters who are listed on the document as well. So to begin with, we will have welcome and introductions, opening remarks, and in number 2, the consent items will be the adoption of the meeting agenda and then the approval of the last commission meetings minutes from October the 6th. Item number 3, the presentations. There will be an acknowledgement of the Section A bids. That will begin in tab 2 of your packet. And then also the acknowledgement of the state advisory panelists. So those are acknowledgement items. The commission will not be voting on those items. They will just be acknowledging that they have been presented and received. And then in section 4 are the actual action items that the commission will be voting on. These begin in tab number 3 of your packet. So I will go through these briefly. The first one is the list of textbooks and instructional material substitutions. So each year the commission will vote on whether to recommend substitutions for textbooks and instructional materials that are already on the state approved list. So if a publisher has an updated edition of a textbook that's on the approved list, they can submit a request to substitute that newer edition for the one that they have on the list. And it will go through the same review process and go through a screening instrument just like the textbooks that were priorly placed on the list. And then the commission will be voting to recommend that list. The state board will have final approval of those substitutions. The next item for B is the approval of the state textbook contract. So there is a new state textbook contract. It has been revised to reflect the changes in state law that went into effect January 1st of this year. So that contract is being submitted for your approval. Item C are the publisher assurances. That is an addendum to the contract that includes legislation, that includes the legislative changes that went into effect on January 1st. That also includes the publisher corrective action plan language that we discussed earlier. Section 4D, approval of the revised adoption schedule. That is the item that Mr. Wilson presented to you all prior to the workshop, and those are the changes to the adoption schedule that you all will be approving. Section 4E, the screening instruments. They are the instruments that Mr. Gibney presented earlier in Section 5, Tab 5 of your binders. And then finally, election of the chair. State law requires that the textbook commission meet to approve a new chairman or chairwoman for the commission at their first regular meeting of the calendar year, and that will happen at the end of the meeting. And then finally, sections 5, announcements and notices, upcoming meeting dates, and then closing and adjournment. I'd be happy to answer any questions you all have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Questions about our agenda at 1:30? Okay, at this time we will adjourn for lunch, and at 1:30 will be the regular meeting of the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. See you back then. Good afternoon. It's time to call to order this meeting of the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission. Ms. Rebecca Wright, Policy and Communications Coordinator, Division of Curriculum and Instruction, Tennessee Department of Education, will call roll.
Mr. Jason Vance, Ms. Susan Bunch, Ms. Lauren Nash, Ms. Susan Bunch.
Here.
Ms. Lauren Nash.
Here.
Mr. Kyle Mallory.
Here.
Ms. Kelsey Cruz.
Here.
Dr. Jason Robinson.
Here.
Dr. Bill Campbell.
Here.
Ms. Cynthia Bryant.
Here.
Dr. Vicki Kirk.
Here.
Chairman Hammond.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. This is the first meeting with a new commission, and so we would like to go around and make introductions. And we're going to start to my left, Ms. Lauren Nash, and if you will just turn on your mic, introduce yourself, tell us about yourself. We'll go one after another. I won't interrupt with each person. Thank you.
My name is Lauren Nash. This is my 7th year teaching first grade school in Harrelson Elementary in Paris, Tennessee.
My name is Kelsey Cruz. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, where I teach at Fulton High School, and I teach special education there.
I'm Cindy Bryant, and I am a mother and a grandmother, and I'm not in education, but care very much about our educational system.
My name is Jason Robinson, and I am a professor in the College of Education at Lee University.
Elizabeth Taylor from the Tennessee Department of Education, and I am the attorney for the Textbook Commission.
I'm Dr. Craig Hammond, principal at West End Middle here in Nashville, and I'm the acting chairman of the commission and serving my 4th year on the commission.
Rebecca Wright, Tennessee Department of Education, and I provide research, policy, and administrative support for the commission.
I'm Dr. Vicki Kirk. I'm the Chief Academic Officer for Tennessee, Deputy Commissioner serving on the Commissioner's behalf.
Kyle Mallory, Stewart County Middle School Social Studies teacher, former chairman, Stewart County GOP, Election Commission, PET, and several other things.
Susie Bunch, Director of Schools, Lexington, Tennessee.
Bill Campbell, Nashville, Tennessee, retired educator, and I'm a lay member, new member of the commission.
Thank you, commission members. It's been great getting to know you today, and look forward to serving alongside you. We have item 2 on our agenda. Before we do that, some opening remarks. You know, our purpose as the State Textbook and Quality Instructional Materials Commission is to put forward a list of approved texts that align with standards and meet the highest standards of quality for Tennessee students. So that's what we're here to do today, and specifically we're at the point of beginning the review process for career and technical education instructional materials. And so much of our work today will focus on beginning that process, which actually has already begun, but we'll be putting forward some motions hopefully to further that work so that it can continue this spring, summer, and wrap up in the fall. 2 consent items on the agenda. This will be a voice vote on the adoption of these items, the adoption of today's agenda, and also the approval of October 6, 2014 meeting minutes. Ms. Wright, is there anything to mention on the October 6 meeting minutes?
No, sir. Those meeting minutes or the minutes that were sent to the commission for review and approval last fall, and the draft copies have been posted on the Department of Education's website.
Yeah, thank you. All in favor for the consent items, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that motion carries. The ayes have it. So we'll begin to continue through our agenda. Item 3 are presentations. A is the acknowledgement of Section A bids. Mr. Monty Wilson, Tennessee Department of Education, will speak to this.
Thank you, Chairman Hammond. My name is Monty Wilson, Deputy Director of Content and Resources for the Tennessee Department of Education. At this time, I would like to bring before you the preliminary bids for Section A. Pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 49-6-2202A, it is the duty of the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission to prepare a list of standard edition of textbooks and instructional materials for approval by the State Board of Education. Our current adoption cycle is Section A, which includes the following career clusters from Career and Technical Education: Advanced Manufacturing, Information Technology, Human Services, and Education and Training. In your binders, you have a stapled packet that was originally located in the back pocket that is the preliminary bid listing for Section A. Currently, we have 6 active publishers who have bid for this section. They are Cengage Learning, CEV Media, CompuScholar, EMC, Goodhart Wilcox, and McGraw-Hill. Prentice Hall, division of Pearson, was included in your information. However, at this point in time, they have chosen to withdraw from the bid process for Section A. The preliminary bid list is being presented to the Commission for your acknowledgement. At this time, I can answer, or I would be happy to try to answer any questions anyone might have.
Any questions, Mr. Wilson? Okay, Mr. Wilson will also acknowledge the state advisory panelists.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to draw your attention in your packets to, or in your folders, to tab 3. Wait a second. Tab 2, pages 17 and 19. I believe that's correct. Yes. Page 17 and 19 from Section 2 of your binder. At this time, I'd like to recognize the state advisory panelist. According to TCA Code 49-6-2201N1, the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission, through its chair, may recruit and appoint an advisory panel of expert teachers and other experts in each subject area or grade level to advise the Commission on textbook and instructional material selections. The State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission Rule 0520-5-1.09 states that the chair will present that list of members of the advisory panel to the Commission. At this point in time, I'd like to present the 16 panelists selected on page 18 or page 19 of your folder, with the one substitution of Diana Hall to replace Crystal Uren, who had to withdraw from her selection. That was a voluntary withdrawal on her part, and Diana Hall would be substituting for her. So at this time, I would simply just like to present for acknowledgement those 16 individuals.
Any questions for Mr. Wilson? Okay, thank you. You may want to stay up here, Mr. Wilson. Okay. We're going to move to item 4 on our agenda, which there are 6 action items today. And with each one, we will hear a brief description, and we'll do a roll call vote if there are motions to make any of these official. First is letter A, recommendation of the textbook and instructional materials substitutions. Mr. Wilson, Deputy Director, Content and Resources, Tennessee Department of Education.
Thank you, Chairman. At this time, I'd like to draw your attention to Section 3. Begins on page 21. The State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission is tasked with approving textbook substitution per Commission Rule 0520-5-1-.07. It states that at the first State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission meeting, the Commission will consider substitutions. All publishers with textbooks and instructional materials on the official list of textbooks approved by the State Board of Education for any of the 6 adoption cycles may submit substitution requests on an annual basis. Last fall, publishers were notified that they could submit these substitutions beginning on December 18th of 2014, and all substitution requests were received by our offices as of February 9th of 2015. We had a total of 2 publishers submitting substitution requests. Those publishers were McGraw-Hill and Cengage Learning, and it was for just 4 individual textbooks that have been previously approved by the State Board. You can see a listing of those materials starting on page 23 of your folder, and there also are, actually we conducted a review of these materials, and those review materials are found in the back pocket of your folder in a document that is entitled, or that's cover page starts with textbook screening instrument, and those reviews have been made available to you. At this time, if you have any questions regarding any of these substitutions or the substitution process itself, I would be happy to try to answer those questions for you.
These look like social studies textbooks, psychology, and economics.
Correct. At this time, as a brief summary, I believe we have McGraw-Hill as requesting 3 substitutions: AP Economics, AP Science of Psychology, and History of the Modern World. Cengage has 1 substitution request, which is the American Pageant. All of those textbooks are under social studies, which was adopted 2 years ago.
And these were approved at that time through our process.
Correct. They went through the entire bidding process, the review process, and those textbooks were approved and put on the official list of social studies textbooks by the State Board. This is, in essence, a request to include these substitutions for these books, meaning these books have a more recent edition available. So districts would have the option of purchasing the original textbook or to continue to use those. Or if they had not purchased yet, they could choose to purchase the more recent revised edition if those are eventually approved and put on the official list.
Okay, Mr. Mallory.
So these are corrections or just revisions due to history?
It would be, I did not review the books, so I cannot speak for each one of those, but the information in the reviews that were done, they can include any revisions made, whether they were content revisions, whether they were changes. The substitutions can encompass a myriad of different possible changes left to the publisher. The publishers do include a narrative request summarizing what those changes are, and I believe, for example, one of those is found on page 27 under tab 2, where they provide some information that's for your review, but also the educators that were asked to review these textbooks were given this information as well. The individuals who reviewed the substitution request were actually the original members who reviewed the original request, so they were very familiar with those textbooks. They received a copy of the newer version, had a copy of the original version, had the narrative versions of the changes by the publishers, and then provided feedback for your review based on their review.
Any other questions? Ms. Bunch.
If it does not say it's designed for AP, could it be used for AP?
It could. That is an LEA decision.
Okay.
Some textbooks have a very clear designation that the book was designed for that AP course in order to prepare the students to pass, of course, the AP exam that is associated with this course. Districts also have the option of using those textbooks for a non-AP course if they so choose. It is entirely up to the LEA.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, do we have a motion for recommendation for these substitutions?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Mallory makes a motion. A second? And Dr. Campbell, thank you. Ms. Wright, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Vance? Oh, sorry. Ms. Bunch?
Yes.
Ms. Nash?
Yes.
Mr. Kyle Mallory?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Kirk?
Yes.
And Chairman Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Okay, the ayes have it. The next item on the agenda is the approve the textbook contract. Ms. Elizabeth Taylor, Staff Attorney, Tennessee Department of Education.
Good afternoon. Pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 4962203, the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission may promulgate rules establishing the minimum manufacturing standards and specifications for textbooks, as well as establishing the conditions under which it contracts with publishers. In the last General Assembly, there were some changes to the textbook laws which affected the nature of the textbook contracts and the type of things that the contracts had to include. So what we're presenting for approval today is a revised textbook contract which basically incorporates the new changes in law into the existing textbook contract that had previously been used. Most notably, the new textbook contract has been updated to incorporate the Statement of Publisher Assurances, which is basically a set of guidelines that publishers have to assure the commission that they will follow regarding the accuracy and the suitability of the textbooks, which we'll get into in further detail in the next action item. The new textbook contracts also incorporate the new definition of the word textbooks. The General Assembly has revised the term textbooks to also include electronic materials such as CD-ROMs and other materials that don't fit into the traditional bound paper version of textbooks. So the contracts will now include the additional materials as well. Also, the new contracts reflect the new lower bond requirements contained in Tennessee Code Annotated 4962203. So the new lower bonds are now reflected in the new contracts. So basically, the new contracts have been through the approval process with the Attorney General. The Tennessee Department of Education worked with the Attorney General's office, and we have to get approval from the Attorney General's office for the final version of the contract, which is presented to the Commission in Section 4, page 31. Page 31 goes through the changes. Page 33 is where the new actual contract begins.
Any questions for Ms. Taylor? Okay, do we have a motion for approval of the textbook contract?
I so move.
Second?
I got the second.
Okay, Ms. Wright with a vote.
Ms. Bunch?
Yes.
Ms. Nash?
Yes.
Mr. Mallory?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Kirk?
Yes.
Chairman Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, 9 ayes.
Okay, the textbook contract is approved. The next action item on the agenda is the textbook publisher assurances. Again, Ms. Taylor.
Again, the Textbook Commission has the duty to establish the manufacturing standards of textbooks and instructional materials, as well as establishing that the textbook and instructional materials are grammatically correct, they're clear, substantive, factual, and there's no errors. And to keep in line with that, the General Assembly in Tennessee Code Annotated 49.62201 has some things listed that publishers must agree to in order to go through the bid process. Publishers must ensure the book or material's accuracy. They must certify that the textbook or instructional materials have been thoroughly examined and reviewed by qualified contact experts for factual accuracy. And I'm sorry, if you guys want to read along, I'm in section 4, page 37. Publishers also have to list the professional credentials for at least 3 content review experts who have thoroughly examined the textbook or instructional materials for content accuracy. Publishers must certify that the textbook or instructional materials have been thoroughly examined and reviewed by qualified editors for typographical errors and errors in grammar, written expression, spelling, formatting, and other substantive elements that may affect student learning. And publishers must agree to correct all factual and editing errors found in a textbook or instructional materials at the publisher's expense. Okay, and part of the new assurances incorporates the corrective action plan that the department has established, whereby any factual errors or any errors within the textbook have to go through the review process. The publishers are notified. They submit an action plan, which goes to the state board, and it's reviewed that way. So the publishers' assurances and the new contracts incorporate the new corrective action plan to ensure the accuracy of the textbooks and instructional materials used. This is going to be done during the approval process, so it's not actually included in the contract. It's a separate document that's incorporated into the contract. So to begin the approval process, they'll have to do this assurance agreement and agree that they're going to give the department the Textbook Commission these assurances in order to have their books considered. Again, this document was formulated in conjunction with the Attorney General's office, and it has been approved by the Attorney General's office for Textbook Commission use.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Taylor? Mr. Mallory.
Would you talk about the errors, if the community sees errors or other experts in the community see errors or LEA see errors, the process that they can go about? Because that is, I think, extremely important.
I think Rebecca would be best to talk about the actual process that the publishers have to go through. So I'm going to turn it over to her to answer that question.
Chair recognizes Ms. Wright.
So there are 2 different processes whereby members of the public can submit feedback on textbooks and instructional materials. The process when books are approved for when books are going through the state review process is different than when books are actually on the official list. So when books are going through the state review process, there's actually a document in your packets, and the title of it is Public Feedback Form. It should be in the back pocket, and it lists the steps that each member of the public can go through. So basically, to summarize it, members of the public can access those materials for this cycle by going on to the State Department of Education's website. They can submit the online public comment form, or they can go to the textbook collection site at Middle Tennessee State University, view those textbooks, and complete that form. Those comments are then submitted to the state review panelists, as well as the State Textbook Commission, the publishers, local education agencies, and the Tennessee General Assembly gets copies of them as well. All of that feedback is considered and reviewed by members of the state advisory panelists before they make their recommendations to the publishers. The Textbook Commission also will be able to review those public comments before making their recommendation to the State Board of Education for approval. The State Board of Education also receives those comments, and so they can review them as well. Once a book is placed or any material is placed on the state-approved list, then members of the public can complete the other public comment form or the publisher corrective action or error notification plan that would then signal that a publisher would need to submit a corrective action plan. So there are two different forms that members of the public can complete once a book is on the state-approved list. And those feedback forms are sent into the department. We send that to the Textbook Commission and the State Board of Education. And any additional comments also go to the Tennessee General Assembly as well. And so all that is outlined in that document in your packets. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
And that is online as well, the public comment?
Yes, both forms are available online, as well as the document outlining that public comment procedure is also available on the Textbook Services website. That document was actually created in response to a constituent request and a legislative request this General Assembly session. So that is a new document. It is posted on the if you go to the Department of Education's Textbook Services website that's on the screen, it's available there, as well as both comment forms.
Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Taylor or Ms. Wright? Okay, do we have a motion for the approval of the textbook publisher assurances?
I'll make that motion.
Any seconds?
I'll second.
Ms. Wright for a vote.
Ms. Bunch?
Yes.
Ms. Nash?
Yes.
Mr. Mallory?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Kirk?
Yes.
Chairman Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Okay, the textbook publisher assurances is approved. Item D of our action items is to approve the revised 2014-16 Section A adoption schedule. Mr. Monty Wilson, Tennessee Department of Education.
Thank you. At this time, if you would like to turn to page 45 under tab 4 of your folders, I will be referencing the document listed there. State law, Tennessee Code Annotated 49-6-2202D requires the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission to establish appropriate deadlines for the review of textbooks and instructional materials. In accordance with this law, every year the Commission approves an annual textbook adoption cycle. This was actually approved at the October 6, 2014 meeting. That document actually is on page 43. However, at this point in time, we are requesting a revised document be approved, which is the document beginning on page 45. Several requests were made, both by individuals who are serving as advisory panelists and publishers, so that we would not have a required mandatory meeting Mother's Day weekend. So we have adjusted the schedule to accommodate that request. In addition, it has come to our attention that the State Textbook Commission meeting scheduled for September 14th and 15th should be changed to September 17th and 18th. So I would ask that you make that change on the Section A adoption schedule as well at this point in time. If you have any questions regarding this document or the schedule itself, I would be happy to answer any questions you have to the best of my ability.
Okay, questions for Mr. Wilson? Mr. Mallory?
I thought we were just going with the 18th for that Friday.
Yeah, Ms. Wright, if you will address.
We may need both days, so it'd be better to go ahead and approve both of them, but we may only meet on that Friday. And that will be updated on the Commission's website in case that change is made, so the members of the public are aware.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the adoption schedule revised?
I'll make the motion.
Anyone second?
I would be glad to second that motion.
Okay, Ms. Wright, for a vote.
Ms. Bunch?
Yes.
Ms. Nash?
Yes.
Mr. Mallory?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Kirk?
Yes.
Chairman Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Okay, the revised Section A adoption schedule is approved. Item E on our action items is the approval of the Section A textbook and instructional materials screening instrument. Chair recognizes Mr. Thomas Gibney, Program Manager for Student Success, Division of Career and Technical Education, Tennessee Department of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commission members. As we discussed this morning, the role of the Textbook Advisory Panel is to review textbook publishers' materials submitted for courses in this year's designated cycle. As such, the panel must determine whether these materials meet the level of rigor and relevance required by the course standards. To aid in this work, the department has developed screening instruments to ensure that all prospective materials are evaluated fairly and consistently. Per the textbook adoption schedule, Cycle A is devoted to the review and adoption of instructional materials aligned to career and technical education courses within the advanced manufacturing, education and training, human services, and information technology career clusters. All Cycle A screening instruments must be approved by the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission per Commission Rule 0520-5-1-.09. 12 screening instruments are hereby submitted for the Commission's recognition, differentiated by program of study in order to fully capture the standards nuances in each, as we discussed this morning. And all of those instruments are listed on page 47 in your binder, and you should have each of the instruments page by page in the pages that follow there. Approval of these instruments will ensure the Textbook Advisory Panel is equipped to adequately evaluate all materials received as part of Cycle A bid. I will take any questions you have.
Any questions for Mr. Gibney regarding the screening instruments? Okay, does anyone want to make a motion with regard to the screening instruments, to approve the screening instruments?
I make a motion that we do approve these screening instruments.
Thank you. Anyone second?
Second.
Okay, Ms. Wright for a vote.
Ms. Bunch?
Yes.
Ms. Nash?
Yes.
Mr. Mallory?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Kirk?
Yes.
Chairman Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 9 ayes.
Okay, the Section A textbook and instructional materials screening instruments are approved. Thank you.
Commission.
Action item F is the election of a chair for this year. And at this time, I don't believe we're going to say anything to this. Okay, Ms. Wright is going to present this one.
Members, in tab 6, behind tab 6 in your packets, beginning on page 193, according to state law, Tennessee Code Annotated 4962201, members of the State Textbook and Instructional Materials Quality Commission shall elect a chair for 1 year at their first regular meeting of each calendar year.
Mr. Robinson, question.
Rebecca, would you mind, before we go down through this, explain to all of the new members as well as those of us returning exactly the responsibilities of the chair? Does their vote mean more? Responsibilities of the chair.
So the chairman has the same responsibilities as the rest of the textbook commission members, other than the chair does chair the commission meetings and would convene before the meeting to determine and approve the schedule. So the agendas for each meeting and workshop is approved by the chair prior to the commission's meeting. The chairman also selects the state advisory panelists for each adoption cycle. So those are the 2 primary differences between a chairman and the regular commission members. Correct. They do not, their vote is not weighted.
Any other questions for Ms. Wright regarding this?
I'd like to.
Yes, Ms. Bunch.
On this, because it said to elect a chair for 1 year, is it common practice to keep the same chair continuous or for change? I mean, is that a practice is what I'm asking.
Chair recognizes Ms. Wright.
I have only been working with the commission for the past 2 years, 2.5 years, so I don't know about prior practice. I know since I have been with the commission, Dr. Hammond has been the chairman, and there has not been change. Before that, we had a different chairman. So there has been change in the past. I wouldn't be able to speak to prior practice beyond those 2 years.
Any other questions? Yes, sir, Dr. Campbell.
It's okay to make a motion, to make a recommendation.
I think if there's no other questions, then we'll go ahead and take any motions.
I recommend the commission elect our current chairman, Craig Hammond, for this next term. For many of us who are new, I think it'll be great to have the continuity of Craig's leadership through this first year as we all learn and grow together. So I nominate Craig Hammond as our chair.
Okay, does anyone second that?
I second.
Okay, Ms. Wright will take a vote.
Ms. Bunch?
Yes.
Ms. Nash?
Yes.
Mr. Mallory?
No.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Bryant?
Yes.
Dr. Kirk?
Yes.
Chairman Hammond? I'm not sure, but we'll go ahead and for the record.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, you have 8 ayes.
Okay, I will serve as chair for the upcoming year. Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda is announcements and notices. A 2015 textbook schedule and meeting dates. Mr. Monty Wilson, Tennessee Department of Education.
Thank you, Chairman Hammond. At this time, I would like to draw your attention back again to the calendar that is located on page 45 behind tab 4. As this is now the approved calendar schedule, I did want to bring to your attention just a few key dates to make you aware of. Our next key date is May 2nd and 3rd of May. And those dates are for the textbook advisory panel, orientation and training, and publisher presentation. You are, of course, invited to attend these meetings if you wish. We should have a signed contract for the location this week. We're waiting to have that officially come in, but as of right now, we do not see any reason why the meeting will not take place at the Inn at Opryland. Not Opryland Hotel, but the Inn at Opryland, which is adjacent to the Opryland Hotel. Just as a quick summary, on May 2nd, that weekend, our advisory panelist members will be attending, and on May 2nd, they will receive training and orientation. They will understand what their role in the process is, understand the timeline, what the importance of their work, and then they will also receive training on the screening instruments that were approved today so that they can move forward and begin reviewing and looking at the textbooks. They will officially be starting their work after that weekend in their review. The other, May 3rd, the next date, that Sunday is reserved for the publishers who are involved in the bidding process. They are allowed that day to present and give a presentation of their materials to kind of talk through like an online component or just clear up any questions in regards to the review process. So on Saturday is really training and orientation, and that Sunday is any concluding training or orientation that's needed, but most of that time will be reserved for the 6 publishers presenting. So that will be May 2nd and 3rd. And then, of course, the next scheduled commission meeting date was approved for September 17th and 18th. We will update that online and in this document. Make that available. And as Ms. Wright mentioned earlier when asked, if only one of those days is needed, an announcement will be made in plenty of time to make arrangements. If there are any questions in regards to the adoption schedule or the calendar, I will do my best to try to answer those.
Okay, questions for Mr. Wilson? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other business from the commission? Anyone like to be recognized to say anything? Mr. Mallory.
I think that we need to ask at least the department to look at the 7th grade materials and social studies. I would ask that we look into that. There's been a lot of public outcry on 7th grade social studies. If I said that's an understatement. And there's a guy I think is that I'll get with you later that may have some information on some of the material that is extremely concerning on material that teachers have with that curriculum. So.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wright, if you want to speak to that.
So, Mr. Mallory, could you exactly let me know what you would like the department to look into? Because just to be clear, so we know that since districts are the ones who actually select the materials for final adoption in their district, and then the state board approves the list, what would you like the department to review?
It appears that that a lot of teachers don't have the appropriate supplemental material with the. We have those standards are dealing with a lot of religion, and the books are probably and or the supplemental material maybe not complete or efficient, or other teachers are finding other material that is inappropriate for the classroom because there's not enough material for the new standards.
So we can send the adoption report to the commission about which supplemental materials and or textbooks and instructional materials that the local districts have adopted, so that you can view that as a commission member. And then if you would like us to continue to look into it after that, we can provide you additional information, if that satisfies your request, sir.
I'll give you a name and number of somebody that may even want to appear in the September meeting to talk about some of the supplemental materials that are going on in the classroom. Is that appropriate?
There is a form on the Department Textbook Services website that any member of the public can complete to speak before the commission. It needs to be completed within, I believe it's 15 days prior to the meeting of the commission in order to speak. So they can just fill out that form to request, and we'll receive it. And that will go before the chairman for approval.
So say we'll have to make sure we distinguish between supplemental materials that are pulled in by teachers as true supplements and those that have been put forth as adoptable textbooks.
And I think that's a problem. I think it's the teachers don't have enough supplemental materials, and thus they're going out and getting their own, and thus we're getting some inappropriate. Did that make sense?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Mr. Robinson? Okay. Any other business? Okay, what's Dr. Campbell? Yes, sir.
As a new member of the commission, I want to thank the staff, particularly Rebecca. It's been, even though we've had postponements with weather and had to go online for some training, I would have found it very difficult to come on the commission as we have today and be as informed and indeed ready to go to work here without Rebecca and the other staff members' outstanding help to us. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right. It's great being with you all today. Thank you for your service, and our meeting is adjourned.